The question is that the bill be now read a second time. The member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I commend the government on this legislation and the amendments to it, but there are some points I want to make. The bill we are debating today adds to the Labor government's election commitment package titled Better Access to Family Payments and is due to come into effect as of 1 July. That is, flexible family tax benefit advances, the Healthy Start for School and the streamlining of compensation payments notification. I welcome the proposed changes to the advance payment system because many of my constituents in Hasluck will benefit from these changes. These amendments and the rules for determining whether an individual is entitled to an advance and eligibility for an advance will assist those families who for various reasons need financial assistance to address a specific need. From my childhood experience, I know how these circumstances arise and create both angst and additional pressure for a family. Hasluck has some of the country's most disadvantaged families, and rising petrol and food costs are already putting upward pressure on household incomes. The carbon tax will further hurt Hasluck families and hundreds of thousands of others around this country. The change, however, will benefit for those families who receive the benefits of the family tax benefit at the end of the financial year. Unexpected surges in cost of living or unforeseen emergencies require funding, and many families often do not have the spare cash to meet the increased costs. This can affect families at any time. For example, it is not uncommon for circumstances to arise where a family member loses their job or is cut back to part-time hours, or a family member needs an operation and is off work for a protracted period of time. Equally, treatment for specific illnesses can have a detrimental impact on a family, and the provisions provide a degree of comfort for those eligible for advances. I met a couple who were doing well financially until the breadwinner had a debilitating accident. He was incapacitated and can no longer work, even though he has the desire to, and expressed to me his frustration at not being able to do so. They now struggle to make ends meet. I know of a number of families in my electorate that have found themselves in this position recently. Every one of them would benefit from the ability to draw down on these funds as a contingency to address a financial pressure point. The legislation will enable procedures to be more flexible than previous arrangements and is subject to an upper or lower limit. Repayment of the advance over a fixed period will be abolished and replaced with a period of 2 financial years from which to pay off the owed amount. This will reduce the burden of forcing families to make choices about what they will or will not go without. Instead, they can plan for these repayments. That additional burden that sometimes is placed upon families because of the time constraints and the requirement to repay is sometimes not fully understood and therefore causes some angst when letters convey the immediacy of that payment. And I compliment the government on the fact that it has given this time period to allow for those repayments to occur. My office consistently receives calls from families who are having problems managing payments or repayments with Centrelink. For many, it is a daunting process and reinforces a cycle of interdependency with the agency. It's like a marriage. Both of you need each other, but one doesn't understand the full complexity of the problems that they're negotiating with the other. To be able to manage repayments in a more suitable way to the family would be a welcomed development. Allowing a more flexible payment advance regime would also help certain families that are in most need. The Coalition supports an Australia with smaller government and one that trusts its people to have enough intelligence to live their own lives and make the right decisions. History shows that if people are given more personal responsibility, then they are more likely to act in a responsible manner when it comes to their finances. I believe that this arrangement will allow people to make the best financial decision for their family at the time, and it is long overdue. Another amendment that I support is the compulsory health checks for children turning 4 in a particular income year before parents are able to receive the family tax benefit A. It is a sound health prevention measure that will enable a child's health to be assessed, treated and monitored through ongoing health care plans. I congratulate the government on including this measure within the legislation. Prior to entering politics, I was the Director of Aboriginal Health in both Western Australia and New South Wales, and I supported the implementation of child health checks. The health checks regime that the Labor government is seeking to introduce would ensure that information collection, which establishes a patient history and provides the opportunity to undertake an overall assessment of the child, is something that has been needed in terms of all children, because it gives the capacity for those children to be identified at an early point in their life, identified specific illnesses, or even shortness of sight that enables then that matter to be rectified and for them to enjoy a quality of life. Recommending appropriate interventions and the provision of advice and information to the child's parent or carer. And then keeping a record of the health assessment and offering the child's parents and or carer a written report about the health assessment with recommendations about matters covered by the health assessment. And I strongly support the examination and assessments provided under the Healthy Kids Check, including height and weight, because they are critical markers of development, eyesight, hearing, oral health, which covers both teeth and gums, toileting and allergies. A family which is on an income support payment do not neglect their children or not know how to care for them, but their level of disposable income can be problematic, and they may not prioritise a child health check as a result. This amendment will make people think about their child in a different way, and this small change can make a huge difference to a young person's potential for a healthy start to life and their ability to receive a decent education. It is a sad world that we live in when we must introduce this type of amendment that insists on health checks for 4-year-olds, but it is a necessary one, and I strongly support this move. There is no silver bullet solution to the problems for all of Australia's children. The overwhelming majority of young families in this country are strong, caring units with the utmost attention given to their child's physical, emotional and social development. The challenge is the balance between a government passing on this information or being seen as patronising to new parents. People have been having children for millennia, and a government does need to be mindful of this when revealing best practice to Australian families. There is no better substitute than family tradition passed down from one generation to the next generation on how to care for our young children. However, there are individual families that experience pressures which creates a range of problems, and in this instance measures are needed to assist those struggling families. However, what we do know now more than ever is the foundation of social, emotional and physical well-being at a very young age has a profound impact on the child in adolescence and adult life. Government has a responsibility to act in the best interests of all Australians. Studies showed that the child growing up with unchecked or undiagnosed health problems will struggle to enjoy life fully, and the onset of chronic diseases will be an imposition on the quality of their life. In this regard, I welcome the move to require health checks on young children turning 4, as it will identify early on for some families health problems that might be cured or treated. This is part of a wider attempt to ensure the nation's young children have a better start to life. However, the devil is in the detail of the programs and services, and this is something that should be of concern to people watching this unfold. An important part of this bill is the change to the process for compensation recipients to go through when receiving their payment. Suffering an injury is stressful enough, and it is is stressful enough as it is without the government making it more complicated for the individual. People generally receiving compensation have suffered some kind of trauma, either mental or physical. Currently, when a person receives a compensation payment, they must notify Centrelink of the receipt of this money so that Centrelink can determine their eligibility to receive their social security entitlements. Unfortunately, many do not realise their obligation to do so, and once Centrelink is aware of it, and as a consequence, the individual is burdened with a debt which they have to pay back to the Commonwealth. The new amendments will streamline the process and require payers of compensation to notify Centrelink of this payment, so Centrelink can automatically adjust the recipient's social security payments. I believe this process will remove an unnecessary and additional stress for people that have likely suffered enough prior to receiving the compensation. In Hasluck, I see on a day-to-day basis many people that are affected in this way. There have been a number of terrible accidents in my electorate of late, and these have left survivors disfigured, severely injured or unable to work. A tragedy can strike any of us at any time. For those in our society that are fortunate enough through their hard work and be in a strong financial position to support themselves, or a family member post-accident or with a resultant disability, then this change will not be a factor of concern. The expression "there for the grace of God go I" is one we do not often think about. But when you see a severe motorbike accident on a highway or a person being resuscitated on the side of the road, it puts into sharp focus that these people were travelling to work in Hasluck. They probably kissed a loved one goodbye, left for the day thinking, "I will see you tonight for dinner," and their head filled with the thoughts and pressures that preoccupy most of us every day. But these people did not come home safely that evening. Their lives have changed forever. So after the initial shock of their life-changing injury wears off and the pragmatic thoughts surface, it is at this point that the government has a moral and ethical responsibility to provide appropriate support to reduce the burden on both the individual and the family. We cannot stop accidents. By their very nature, they are unplanned. What a government can do is to make sure that if compensation is awarded, then a person struggling with this trauma is not penalised by Centrelink for getting or incorrectly revealing their compensation payment to government. It is easy to forget as politicians that when we are debating legislation that these changes have a real impact on people's lives. They just aren't words to score political points. Our collective decisions in this place have real and lasting impacts on our constituents that trust we will make the right decision in the national interests at all times. Parliament should be doing all it can to make the lives of its people easier. So for the people of Hasluck and Australia that are suffering with an injury, this measure streamlines and makes their challenge much easier. I appreciate the benefits that will arise from this legislation because it focuses upon the needs of Australians who, at times of both trauma and at times of opportunity, provide the necessary steps that improve the quality of life for individuals and for families, but ultimately for a community. Because in the long term, with the child health checks, for example, and the level of streamlining in the compensation arrangements, it removes to some extent a burden of pressure on a family. It provides an opportunity for families to understand the legislation, not so much the legislation, but the programs and services that arise from it. Because too often when I interact with people, one of the greatest challenges that we always have in imparting information is people's understanding of the complexity of programs that we put in place that are there to assist them. And to that end, Mr Deputy Speaker, I acknowledge the work of the Minister and believe that these measures go a long way to making life much easier, certainly for the families of Hasluck, but in the greater sense for the families and people of Australia. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.